Gee, thank you. I appreciate it. Good to see everybody.
A very
So-
select group here today.
It is a select group. So Wendy asks me to facilitate chapters in the book. So it doesn't go without saying, Bob heard this morning, Lauren heard this morning. I really don't care what the chapters say. All right, I really don't. It's an entree to, the main course, but we'll take it because we can have a very nice entree. So first question is, how many times did you listen or read these 2 chapters? Honestly, Linda.
0.
Oh, great.
Well, I'm on this call because I heard you were facilitating. I really don't care what the subject is.
Oh, God.
And it fit into my schedule. So here I am.
Well,
Lauren.
I'm right up there with you because which 2 chapters are we talking about?
I know.
That's even better.
Rick.
That was going to be my question. I was like,
Okay,
which
so,
chapter?
So before I
Wendy?
incriminate myself,
Oh, sure. You let me.
You set me
go
up
under
here,
the
girl.
bus.
All right. The 2 chapters are making decisions and solving issues, and motivation and courage. So that actually does sound like 4 chapters, but it's actually 2 chapters.
oh,
And
okay.
Alan has the chapters right, so he was paying attention.
Oh, good. Oh, Lord.
Has anybody read these things?
Of course, we've read them.
Read them. Actually, we in our leadership cohort, those are the last couple chapters, and George actually facilitated us a week or so ago. So
Oh,
we read them.
All right. So I'm going to rely on Lauren and Bob.
uh-oh.
Oh,
Uh-oh, jeez.
another victim. And I know Colster has read these.
Sure he has.
I know he has because I've just been working with him on these. We facilitated each other on these chapters.
Hmm.
Damn hearing aid off.
All right. So what I'd like each of you to do is grab a piece of paper and a pen.
That I can do.
You're all right, Linda. I don't care what Bob says. Well, I care a little bit about what Bob says. And what I'd like you to write down is, and this is going to be great for those who have not read these chapters,
Okay.
go with the flow. Look at the first page, flip through it, whatever you need to do. Write down your number 1 hard-hitting, impactful point from this chapter, making decisions and solving issues. Your number 1 impactful point. A show of hands when you have done with that little piece of business. God, Bob, if I had to watch that background of yours for any length of time, I mean, it would blow my head up.
Bob likes that background.
Everybody
like it
else
too.
liked it.
I didn't say I didn't like it. So
You're
Rick
going to have to
Lautner-
skip me, Alan. You're going to have to skip me because I took my chapters out of my book, which I did show you I had this morning, and I'm afraid I left them in New York.
See, this is the kind of stuff that your clients will do to you.
Of course.
You know, but you will remember as we go through it. So
Oh, my God.
Rick is done.
Yeah.
The other Rick is out of touch. Linda,
I can't help you because Bob's got the book upstairs.
Oh, sweet Jesus.
So I don't have access to the book, but go
all
ahead.
right.
Who's
I'll
on
listen.
first?
Bob, did you write something down?
No, but I have it in my head.
You're
Write it
supposed to write it
down.
down, honey.
Wendy, did you
Oh.
write something down? I've always loved that woman. Now I know why. So let's pick on Mr. Lochner. What was the point that you had written down, my friend?
Common sense.
What about it?
I'm on an existing rant on the lack of critical thinking that I see across the board. And so that just jumped right out at me. It said, because we know common sense is not common. So what does that really mean? Common sense. And how do we corral it to, to the guys making quality decisions? Hell, anybody can make a decision. It's the quality of the decision that we're after. And so, to me, it's a good lead into a conversation around critical thinking.
Excellent. So understanding that point, Rick, what action would you like to take as a result of your understanding of that point? What would you like to do about it?
Am
You
I
personally.
Am I answering as a student or a facilitator?
It doesn't matter.
Well, there's more to the answer as a facilitator, I think.
Then it's a facilitator. No, seriously, what would you like to do as Rick Lochner? You understand this. What do you need to do going forward?
Well, I've got a personal development goal in my own right to be more, what's the right word? Not conscious, deliberate about my own decision-making as I facilitate these conversations around other leaders' decision-making process.
Excellent. So by being more deliberate in your decision-making process, what is the benefit to you?
The benefit to me as a coach is I get to, it's those 4 stages of learning. I stay within the conscious competence category instead of it being, well, I just did. It's common sense. I just did. Well, that's kind of hard to facilitate the right questions when you don't know the questions to ask.
And if you're able to stay in conscious competence on a regular basis with your clients, what will that bring you?
It's not about what it brings me. It's about what I bring to the
no,
clients.
I'm asking you the question. What does that bring to you?
No, it just helps me be a more effective coach to my clients.
All right. Thank you. Wendy, what did you have written down?
I wrote down attitudes and habits influence actions and thoughts.
Okay. Do you want to explain that a little further, or that's just it?
Well, no, for me, you always have your attitudes going on and you have certain habits that you do. Some habits are better than others, but really it comes down to where are my attitudes, my train of thought in every action that I do.
Okay. Understanding that.
Good?
Yes.
Is it not so good? How does that impact the outcome?
Excellent. So understanding that, what action would you like to take based on that thought?
Actually, it is something that I do, but I think it's really powerful because we all have our good days and our bad days. It's consciously thinking about my attitude and keeping myself in that positive mind frame. So when I feel myself going, I need to stop myself, reset myself. If it means, get up, walk away for a minute, come back, just kind of regroup so that I'm bringing the best attitude to whatever it is I'm doing.
How do you do that?
What do you mean? How do I do that?
How do you bring yourself back? How do you consciously think about that on a regular basis?
What I would do is if it's something that is taking me off my positiveness, walk away, just for a quick, 3-minute, come back, sit down, and rational thought. Let's look at the facts.
Okay.
And then that allows me to bring myself back around.
If you're able to continuously do that, learn how to master that, what benefit will you gain?
I'm going to say peace, if that makes sense.
If it makes sense to you.
Stress, just like that Zen.
Cool.
And I can better help other people because if they're in a tizzy or a downward spiral, I won't get sucked into that downward spiral.
Right on. Bob, did you think of what your point was?
Yes. The first step in the process, identify the issue.
Identify the issue. And what do you plan on doing relative to that?
Well, so often you're in a situation where people are telling you what the issue is and drilling down through that issue to make sure that they've really identified the issue. As an engineer, we always were taught to identify the problem first, which is the same thing as an issue. Because most of the time people waste their time because they're chasing their tail on something which isn't really the issue. And you hear it time after time when you're working with a group or even with an individual, they tell you what they perceive the problem to be, but they really haven't defined the problem. And unless you define the problem, or unless you identify the issue, you're never going to solve it.
So it might sound rhetorical, but I don't know if it is. So what do you plan on doing relative to this?
Making sure that when I'm coaching an individual or I'm working with a group, that there is more discussion around that initial point. And that initial point may come from one of the people in the group who says, well, you know, the issue is, and is it really that issue? Have they really defined that issue? So make them drill down and make the group drill down into that supposed issue to make sure that they've really defined the issue as a starting point.
Excellent. So when you're able to achieve that, what's the benefit to you of helping your clients find that spot?
You're never always going to solve the problem 100% of the time, but the percentage that you solve it will be greatly increased, and your credibility will be greatly increased, and the credibility of the group will be increased because they are going step by step by initially defining the issue and then working through the following steps in the problem solving.
Thank you for sharing that. Lauren, has this triggered any thoughts on the chapter?
I have a confession.
Yes.
I just remembered that I didn't actually leave my chapters in New York. So you saw my eyes looking down. I just reached over and saw where they were, and I'm carefully reviewing them. And what the chapter really brought up for me, and I'm not going to pull out this exact phrase. I do most of my decision making. I'm a gut emotional decision maker. And so it was very helpful to me to look at the process and identify the situation, what it actually is, and be able to develop alternatives. I think it was the developing alternatives. I almost always skip this because I have come up with a solution. I've come up with the best solution right away. And so I end up acting on that. So most people, and Wendy would know this better than maybe all of you, most people would say that I'm an extremely deliberate decision maker. But it's not what's behind the behind the facade. It's I act quickly, and this really gave me confidence that I could go through a process and still trust my gut in the end. So that's the part that was most valuable to me.
So without me making any assumptions here, I've heard what you've said. What do you plan on doing specifically going forward?
I plan to use this new confidence to actually expedite my own personal decision-making process. And I can imagine how that might translate to my client, because I think I can show by my behavior how they might utilize decision-making to their greater benefit.
And if you're able to do this, what benefit do you gain from this?
My clients will be better off. they will be able to, they will have started creating habits that could potentially be life-changing down the road. So yeah, I think it's all a good thing.
Nice. Thanks for sharing that.
Alan, I have a question.
Yeah.
You know, as I'm looking at the 6 steps, you know, I've always seen these as the six steps of the problem solving process, not the decision making process. What's the difference?
I'll toss it out to the group. I don't know if I have a direct answer other than, are they not the same?
I always thought decisions were subsets of the process. In other words, each step of the problem solving process require decisions to get to the next step. So I'm just curious. They're used interchangeably, but
You don't think they are?
I've always seen this as a problem solving process, not a decision making process.
Same thing. Making a decision, solving a problem is still coming up with an answer. A decision is a decision. It's an answer that you're giving yourself. I have to make a decision. Do I go right? Do I go left? Do I wear shoes? Do I not wear shoes? Do
And
I
you're
comb my
making
hair? Do I
multiple
not comb my hair?
decisions. And you're making multiple decisions as you navigate through that process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But at the same time, it's still the same process. It's a problem. The decision is a problem. Which decision do I make? Do I wear shoes? Do I not wear shoes? I have a problem. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do,
Well,
which is
and
what we would call a problem, right? I have a problem. I don't know how to solve it.
Well, and
I
I
have a
think,
decision. I don't know how to answer it.
But
Make
do you
it.
need 6 steps to figure out whether to go barefoot or not?
No, of course not. Because when we make everyday decisions are commonplace. You know, do I wear pants? Do I not wear pants? You know, it's, you know, in the Zoom world, who cares? In the real world, yeah, you probably should. That's
Until you stand
that's
up.
just part of it. That's just part of one of the decisions we make every single day. Do you wake
Right.
up? Do you brush your teeth? Now, do I wake up and do I spend 20 grand on a new gun safe full of guns? For me, that's going to take some decision making. Okay, am I going to have the money? Am I going to do this? Is it a problem? Well, the problem is I might have to spend it on my new roof. I might, a lot of things. It can be either or, depending on what the complexity of the issue. Again, brush your teeth, not brush your teeth. Pretty short cycle in making that decision.
Right.
Wendy, you were going to say something?
well, I was gonna say, I think as you look at decisions, sometimes when people hear problem, they go, it's negative. Well, if we want to figure out how to increase our sales, is that negative or positive? So is it an issue or is it a problem? So I think sometimes it's simple word play, but it's all coming down to making decisions, and some take less thought, going what Rick said, versus others are more complex and require more thought.
So what types of decisions warrant going through this detailed a process?
Isn't it kind of a personal? Each person would decide for themselves whether they need it.
Okay. When would you need
It
to
has to
process
be.
this detail?
It has to be a new situation which you haven't seen before. Because if the issue is coming up and you've already experienced it and you already have a solution, you're going to skip all the steps to go to the solution.
So,
I
That's
would
where the
concur
critical
with,
thinking, that's where the lack of critical thinking comes into play, right? Because you get into this satisficing mode where you just go with the first logical decision, but you really don't pursue alternatives in a meaningful way.
Linda,
I'm going to challenge Bob on his last comment. If, you know, I can do that.
He's always right, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, shush. No, I understand I understand what you said, that if you've seen the situation, the problem, however we define that before, and you've navigated and solved the issue and made the correct decision. What you said was, if that situation comes up again, you already know what the decision was, so you're going to make that decision again. My challenge to you is, does that not depend on a lot of variables? It may be the same basic thing, but there could be a lot of extenuating circumstances that would make your former decision not correct.
Not if you've properly identified the problem.
But would it not depend on the person who's got the problem and whatever else they've got going on?
It's not a personal decision. It's a problem-solving decision.
I don't know that I agree with that, but that's okay.
This was reminding me of Alan, your comment this morning that nothing is exactly the same.
And here we are.
Well, then you use this process in every situation.
Do we do it subconsciously or unconsciously?
I believe so.
And it could come in a
Just a
split
matter-
second.
Yeah, it's a matter of synapses, bang, bang, bang. And we just process it and we don't even know we do it. It's so subconscious to us.
To Mr. Lochner's point about critical thinking, does that subvent go around the critical thinking process if it's that quick in our brains?
Mm-mm.
And that's what makes it important in order to make it deliberate, be deliberate about what we do. And why the decision-making and problem-solving process that we teach, that we show, really makes them stop, think, next step, stop, think, next step, not stop, think, next step. Instead of it's just a natural flow, just like goal setting. Think of it in goal setting. When you got a goal, what's the immediate thing you do? Well, I got to get in action. You go right from goal to action steps and do you really miss those steps in between? Obstacles, possible solutions, and then action steps? No, your brain is already going, well, this might get in the way, but I'm going to do this. And this is the action I need to take. We just bypass that being subconscious about it.
And then explain,
Non-conscious.
how do you explain people responding to social media posts before they check the accuracy of the information in the original post?
I can't even keep that clean. That answer. Really?
Is that a
They're
decision?
idiots. No, and
But I
what do you
think
think? I'm curious. I have lots of opinions. I mean, I'm happy to share.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Just saying.
Shocking.
No, but I think what Rick is saying is correct in that we might make decisions quickly. That does not mean we are violating the decision-making, problem-solving process. It's just, hopefully, to Rick's point about critical thinking, hopefully intelligent human beings have developed the ability to process that. I mean, to Rick's point, I can I can have something come up and say, okay, here's what I need to accomplish. Here's my rewards. Here's my consequences. Here's my obstacles. How do I solve those? And I can do that depending on what that decision needs to be, how big or little it is. I can do that. So I'm not violating the process. Am I sitting down and agonizing over every step? Maybe not.
Right.
In the
But,
book, in the book, First Break All the Rules,
right.
Marcus Buckingham, the Gallup organization, they identified 10 traits of high-performing leaders / managers, 10 statistically relevant things that those people did better than managers / leaders of low-performing organizations. Of course, being Gallup was full of statistics and everything else, but the bottom line is, I don't know if it was 2 or 3, But one of the things that great leaders, managers do, as opposed to others, is they make quick gut decisions. Period. That is statistically relevant.
What goes
I'm
back
not
to the book
suggesting
blank,
anybody do
Alan.
anything different. It's
But that
relevant to
doesn't
this
mean-
conversation, though.
But that doesn't mean that they don't process.
Right on.
They have the ability to more quickly process than some other folks.
But the reason they can quickly process is they never stop learning.
Right.
That's one of the questions I ask my clients. Look, if you can't make quicker decisions about your business, then do you really know what the hell you're doing?
Whew. Love it, Rick.
I mean, it's the brutal truth. If you just, because it typically comes from business owners that are down in the weeds,
Right.
that aren't paying attention to the bigger things that are happening in their market, in their industry, and whatever else. To me, I mean, I learned how to make these quick decisions in the military, right? I mean, that's the environment where you have to make those, quick on the spot, and don't worry about the fact that the one you made 5 seconds ago is right, because the conditions just changed in the next 5 or 10 seconds. So you keep making them. But in a more practical sense, I think that's a relevant idea, is that how well do you really know your industry? How well do you really know your market, so that you can make those, you can process through that critical thinking cycle quickly. Because none of us has the luxury of saying, well, time out, I need to research, so I make a good critical thought decision. We just don't have
Thus
that.
lies. Thanks, Rick. I apologize for interrupting.
No worries.
There's a line in here that I don't believe it's validity. So I'd like some help with this line. It is on page 5. If you're following at home. The more information you gather about a particular issue, the more likely you will reach the best decision.
Nope, it's not about the information.
There's a limit to that.
It's about the context of that information.
Right. It's the source of the information.
Right under your material.
I don't think it's not volume of information.
That's what it says. Cast a
I
wide net.
know.
Attempt to collect all the information. That's what it says right here.
Yeah, and that's what gets high seas in trouble.
And why did anybody pick that up before we did it?
You know what? I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why, Wendy, because I didn't read it before you did it, like I was asked to. Pardon me.
Hence
you're
why
right.
you should do that.
I know. But I don't care if it's in here, because it leads to a great discussion.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
leave it in there. This isn't, gospel in here where, you take it as it is. So
I
now we're having
would
a,
highlight that and have that discussion. Absolutely.
Mhm.
so that being said, I want to thank those who responded to their number one points, because if we just take one point from the chapter and act on it, we could be a more effective coach. We could have peace and zen. We can better help others. Our percentage of solving problems correctly goes up. Oh, pardon me. Getting calls all the time here. We can have more credibility. Our clients can be better off, and we can create life-changing habits. That's just if we act on one idea from the chapter. So well done, everybody. So that being said, so we have time for the next chapter. Let's rock and roll to motivation and courage. And welcome Bob and Patrice to the call. Have you guys been through this chapter? Have you read or listened to the chapter? Bob or Clarice? No.
Sorry, but I have not.
No. Just ask the question. It's not a value judgment here, just answering. So for those that did, let's do the same exercise. What is your number one point or a super point that you took from this chapter? And when you have one, let's rock and roll. So we're literally talking about Wendy, Bob, the Ricks, and Lauren. And we'll go from there. Who's got one, Rick Lochner? What do you got? You're on mute.
I'll take courage for 500.
Right. Go ahead. You have something?
Well, it's just the idea. I think we undersell or undersell the idea of courage and what it really takes to be courageous. You know, I use one of my favorite stories in my own personal experience is being on a board of directors, 24 members of the board, and being the only one that voted against hiring a new CEO, that particular person. A year later, that same board voted unanimously to fire said CEO. And when we voted, when I didn't go with the crowd, several members of the board silenced me, wouldn't engage in the like. When we voted a year later, those same board members came up and said, "What did you know that we didn't?" I said, "I just had the courage to basically vote what I think half of you knew to begin with. You just wanted to go along." And ever since then, as I work with boards of directors for nonprofits, you know, I challenge the fact, is every vote unanimous? And was there any discussion? Because it does take some level of courage. So that's my courage story. And then I just kind of let it kind of waft over the audience and see what they say. But
so Rick, what does it take for you to be more courageous?
Conviction. I'm like Rick, Coach Rick. I got an opinion on everything. And you know, I'm very convicted, you know, on what I believe. Doesn't make me right. It just gives me the courage to stand up for what I believe. So
that conviction, you know, is there any specific action you need to take, or is this just something you're doing on a regular basis?
You know, it's just something you do on a regular basis. One of the things I learned over the years is you never really know what you believe until you're forced to believe it. Which, to your question, translates into until you have to act on it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we can all sit here on a screen and talk about all the stuff we value and believe in, but until our actions bring that integrity equation together with our words, then do we really know what we believe until we're forced to believe it?
Can I ask a question, please?
Absolutely.
Okay, Rick, in your conviction, does that still mean that you're open to listen to another perspective, or open to look at maybe what you're thinking is not totally aligned with what you say your convictions are? Or
Absolutely.
I mean, are you courageous enough to look at changing your mind?
I am on a well-made argument.
Mhm.
Got it.
But if you catch my meaning.
I do. It better make sense in your head. I got you.
Well, no, it just, that's where the critical thinking comes into play, right? I mean, you know, the fact that, you know, your argument is you read it on, you know, Instagram, you know, who is it? Booker T. Washington said a lie told 1,000 times is still a lie.
Yeah, absolutely.
So.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Who else has a point they'd like to bring up to the group? Or Mr. Colster, we pull you away enough to talk about conviction and courage, joining our friend, Mr. Lochner.
Yes, I can talk. The belief that we can motivate people other than momentarily, I think is a misnomer. I can motivate you to get out of my way by threatening you. I can motivate you to do more work by incentivizing you. As Daniel Pink proved out, and if has anyone here seen the thing on Daniel Pink on motivation? This is yes, this is no, I can read heads. Okay, good. Daniel Pink talks about the the candle and the thumbtack exercise. And it goes into, they did some studies in the London School of Economics, and I wish I could repeat all of the cool stuff he said, but he's much smarter than I am. It goes on to say that other than rudimentary skill sets and rudimentary tasks, monetary or threats of physical harm, caveman with a big stick, does not change or improve productivity or motivation. It has to come from internalized. We've got to internalize the reason why. So I think purpose is knowing why you want to do it. Knowing the why gives you, number one, the reasoning, purpose. And then number two is when you begin to own that, you've got to have that courage to be able to say no or say yes. How often do we say no or do we say yes to our family, friends, customers, clients, call them whatever you want, anybody we want, because we want to please them, not because we have the time, energy, or inclination to do whatever they're asking us to do? How often does that happen? All the time. Nobody wants to be a negative Nelly. But that's where leadership comes in, and it's the hard. It was a quote in a movie by Tom Hanks. It's the hard that makes it great. It's making those tough decisions that leaders have to make, that they have to have courage to make and not go with the flow, like Rick did with that board of directors. Be the only dissenting vote because you just knew something in your gut told you that, right? Something you didn't have any hard evidence. You didn't say you did, but your gut was telling you
red
something
flags,
wasn't there.
but yeah.
Yeah, same thing. I mean, I'll reference back movies because they're kind of a, for our society is Draft Day with Kevin Costner. How did they know? And if you haven't seen the movie, it's about NFL Draft Day, and they're deciding between two top picks, and one guy is the absolute positive. He is the premier number one pick, Heisman Trophy winner, won this world or the national championship, Super Bowl, or collegiately, but something about him was off, and he just knew it. And they all looked at him and said, "You are a flaming idiot if you pass on this guy." And the whole movie is about that whole process. And he made the right decision because of the courage to make that decision. Even though everybody, including his head coach, was telling him, "You pass on this guy, I quit. You're nothing. You never work in this town again." Comes down to passion, purpose, and having courage to stand up for your own convictions and your beliefs. That's my 10 cents.
More like a quarter, but we'll take it.
Well, I thought I could make a phone call.
Who else has a great point from this chapter they'd like to discuss? Something that really touched them.
So, so often we're working with a client or a potential client, and they say to us, "How do I motivate people? How do I get people to be motivated?" Now, Rick started to talk about this a little bit, and it's the internal motivation that really counts, not the external motivation. I'm going to a meeting tomorrow, and this growing, prosperous company is going to try to figure out how to reward and motivate their staff. And they've got about 20 people in the company. And they're going to talk about Employee of the Month awards and giving them a card to Starbucks and all of these types of things. But have they really motivated that group with these trivial rewards? And that's a constant question that I've heard so many times. I've sat in people's office and an employee is walking by outside and they say, how come that employee is walking so slowly? Don't they have work to do? And they want to know how to motivate people. And, you know, it's all about, from my perspective, it's all about the environment and the culture that you create within any group as to whether people are motivated or not. And that culture may not be defined by putting their picture on the wall once every month and putting another picture on the wall the next month. That may not be the motivating force. So, okay, we have to know how to motivate ourselves, but really the most important thing for our customers and our clients is how do they motivate others?
Don't we look into driving forces for that? At least as a start.
That's one of them. That's an excellent point. What
And
are
because
the
everybody's
driving
different.
forces?
well, but the problem is, I think the assessments, absolutely, whether it's driving forces or values, you know, that, but it identifies the values of the individual. And that's where, you know, leaders keep making the mistake of thinking I can motivate my team. And to Rick's point, yeah, you can for a split second. But, you know, when people ask me, well, how do I motivate? My comeback is always, you don't. You inspire, you train, you equip, you do all these things. But their level of motivation is going to be their choice and their choice alone. Your job is to give them a game worth playing so that they can choose to come and play the game. So let's shift the focus to, I mean, that's where I see it. And I've had some success with that. It kind of changes the dynamic of the argument a little bit to put it back on the shoulders of the leaders to not say, well, how do I carrot and stick, you know, these 20 people? No, it's how do I look in the mirror and say, am I giving them am I creating a culture worth playing for?
I'm thinking about this story. It's someplace in our text about the CEO who was discouraged that his company, just the last couple months, his employees seemed lackluster. They weren't meeting their numbers. And his coach suggested that he spend an hour a week going to different parts of his facility and talking with employees one-to-one, and how over a period of time, it actually transformed the company.
How simple is that? You mean I actually have to talk to my people? Find out about them? What they like, what they don't like?
Only if you want to keep them.
Yeah. Funny that. Well,
There's
then we do
that-
an annual review and we ask them that question
Right.
and don't act on it.
Yeah.
And we don't get to the following year with that employee because we didn't do anything about their request.
Well, there's the old phrase about manage by walking around.
Right.
And you know, I've seen evidence of that. This goes back a lot of years, but there was the head of a hospital when we lived in Pennsylvania, and he would walk the halls absolutely every morning and stop and talk to folks and do whatever. And, you know, he knew them, their personal stories. Well, you know, yesterday you told me that this was happening. How is it today? That kind of thing. And yeah, I mean, I've answered the question about how do I motivate my people the same way that Rick Lochner does. It's like, you can't. All you can do is create the environment in which they are motivated. But it's so much an internal thing, and you can't, you know, wave your pom-poms and blow hats, you know, have hats and horns and give out Starbucks cards and that whatever. That lasts for about a nanosecond. And then everybody goes back to whatever they were doing before. You know, they've also been comments about to Bob's phrase about going back to the driving forces. what motivates, what makes somebody happy or feel good about the company that they're working for. It's different for everybody. So, again, all you can do is create that environment and that culture.
I think there's an old term, you've got to own it. No matter what your job is, you've got to own it. And to own it positively means that what Rick said before, you have to be inspired. And that inspiration could be by this walking around type of management where the people just know where the company is going and what their role is and why what they do is important. And now they own that responsibility and keep driving it forward.
It sounds so simple, Bob.
Yeah, doesn't it?
It sounds so simple, but count up how many people you've seen that do that even somewhat effectively. And you're not going to get, you might get past your fourth or fifth finger, but you're not going to run out of fingers and toes. I'll tell you that.
It's
I
not
once
such a
worked
bad
with a
thing.
fella who ran a small manufacturing plant. And he told me that every day when he came in, he walked through the plant and said good morning to everybody. No big long conversations, no patting on the back, just said good morning to everybody. And one day he got diverted by a telephone call as he reached his office at 8 o'clock in the morning. And he was on the telephone for an hour and a half with his boss. And at the 2-hour warning, by 10 o'clock, at least 2 people were at his door wanting to know what was wrong. Which, very simple. And as Alan said, well, doesn't everybody do that? Yes, but, it's
just a start though, isn't it?
I remember when we started Fast Start, somebody said to us, you're going to be teaching people things that they should have learned from their grandmother or their mother when they were children. And that's one of those types of things.
Hear, hear. So with the rest of our time together, I'd like to ask you this question. What did you learn about facilitation from this session?
It's all about the what and how questions. If you really want to get a conversation going, ask the right questions, not just a lot of questions.
And dig deep. And I think that what this session today has pointed out to me, I think, and I will go read the chapters, Alan, is that there is really a link between the two of them. There's a very strong link between motivation and courage and also decision-making. And to Mr. Lochner's point, critical thinking. The absence of critical thinking in so many instances feeds into both of those things, both decision-making and motivation. I'm on your bus, Rick. The numbers of folks who lack critical thinking and having the ability to logically look through a problem to its solution is phenomenal.
Yet presents a great opportunity for us as coaches.
Yeah.
What else did you get?
The other thing you could say to somebody is, didn't your grandmother tell you that?
I think from a facilitator's standpoint, Alan shares, it's not asking the superficial questions, the what, the how, but he allowed us to answer a simple question and didn't let us go. It's drilling down and taking it to the next level, to bad choice of words, but force us, and I don't mean force us, but really to make us think, process out, and what's your action plan? What are you going to do as a result of it? So it's not letting you go with the short, well, I answered the question. And sometimes that takes that takes courage to be able to take somebody out of their comfort zone. And I think that's important. If you're not out of your comfort zone, for me, if I'm not out of my comfort zone, I'm not learning, I'm not developing.
I believe that's, what we should be doing. Making people squirm. And it's hard. You have to listen, you have to be brave, and you have to wait. You have to be patient. But, the
Have
more
you
you
had
do
this-
that. Pardon?
I'm sorry. Have you had a situation or anybody where you're getting engagement from a client and they're talking, but they tend to talk too much off the question you ask them? Now, in the meantime, you feel good because you're engaged and they're engaged with you and they're going long. But after a while, it's like, that's okay. Okay. Are you done? I want to get to the next question. And I've had a case where they revert back to the answer, the long but shallow answer of the first question. And I find myself frustrated with that. And I guess you got to deal with every individual as an individual, but I welcome some advice.
Well, I'll tell you what I do straight off. I will interrupt someone and say, I asked you to say A or B. Which one is it?
I like that.
And again, you are the expert. So you're allowed to interject. You're allowed to stop. You're allowed to pause, do whatever you want. You do not have to let them keep on going because they can go down a rabbit hole. Get the answer and then move on to ask your next question.
All right.
Does anyone else? I mean, I think, thanks, Wendy, for saying it. It is courageous.
Depends on how long-winded they go. I simply just ask the question again, word for word.
Rick's much nicer than me, Bob.
A variation of that would be, but how does that answer the question that I actually asked?
Yeah. Beautiful.
Okay.
You're so diplomatic, Rick.
Eh,
I know.
I got a few clients who would probably argue otherwise, but the ones that feel more like they're going through boot camp than they are through facilitation, but
yeah,
hey, they're still going through it. So what the hell?
Yeah. If you're coaching and you don't make your clients squirm, you're not coaching. And you'll know when you do that.
Yeah.
If you haven't had your clients shed tears, you're not asking the right questions. You're letting them off the hook.
Question for the group or for you, Alan, seasoned facilitators. What are some of the things that you did to develop the courage, the skills to be able to do that?
I'll just speak for myself. It kind of plays off my earlier answer, is if you believe what you're doing is the right thing to do, then you just do it.
Yeah.
And I had a client, I had a business owner in a Panera Bread, 2 meetings in a row, crying her eyes out. But it wasn't because, it was tears of joy, believe it or not, because I had helped her create a vision for her business. So they were literally tears of joy. Although this is a Panera where I'm there like 3 or 4 times a day, 3 or 4 times a week. So twice in a row, they're seeing me, bring this woman to tears. So, but nonetheless, I didn't find it difficult because I believed what I was doing was the right thing to do. And I'll be honest, I learned that from this network.
Right.
I think there's a couple things, Wendy. I think practice is important. And really looking at your fear, your fear of getting an answer that you might not want to hear. And I think, it's overcoming fear. It's in our material. We all work on that. We all have our own fears. But the fearlessness to ask something that is going to make somebody squirm. You know it's going to make them uncomfortable. We all know those questions, but many of us just won't go there. No, we don't want to upset somebody. No, who would want to do that? And I think that's exactly what we want to do.
Yeah, I never know that the question is going to create an emotional reaction. I do know that I can tell body language. If you're reading body language, you can tell it is starting to make them uncomfortable. And I have heard coaches say, well, that's when I back off. Not me,
Nope.
man. I'm going in. And so it's, I never know how they're going to react emotionally, and I don't really care. All I know is that they paid me to help them get to the problem as quickly as they possibly can so we can get on with life in the right way. So that's where I'm kind of the foundation of why I think it's important, to Alan's point.
I think I have to concur both Alan and Rick on that. If I can jump in here real quick, it's our responsibility as coaches to ask that second and third question, not those superficial questions, that second and that third question, those follow-on questions that make the client uncomfortable, that push them to that, oh, wow, he's not going to let go, or she's not going to let go at this moment. It's our responsibility. If we take that seriously, we take what we do seriously as a profession. And, people look at what we do and go, just talk to people, man. What are you doing? No, we are skilled at creating new paradigms and helping our clients create those new paradigms by making them think and go in places that they've never thought they would ever go. They've never been challenged. CEOs have never been challenged. They've never been asked, well, what about you? Like, what do you mean? What about you? I've gotten that. I can't tell you how many times.
But Rick, tears are not a bad thing. I mean,
No.
they're letting you know that they're opening up at a different level, and moving into a different level is not a bad thing. So when people are in tears, that may be an aha and a revelation for them, that that's an emotion about something that they were not thinking was on an emotional level. So I look at tears as a cleansing for them to move and open to go to a new thing.
Think
Amen.
of Cuba Gooding Jr. and Tom Cruise. What was that movie? When he finally got reality, he wasn't just on this pedestal wanting more money, the pampered star football player. The real
Jerry
Oh, you
family
mean the
Maguire.
came
show
out
me
of
the
him.
money thing?
Yeah, Jerry Maguire, right.
He called it the Quan.
Quan, right.
It was the Quan. Jerry,
But
it was his purpose. His purpose was his family. It's interesting you talk about that, Bob, is I'd use that in a speech because he found his purpose was to provide a better life for his family than he had. And that's the only reason he was going for the money, because he wanted to provide for his family. He wanted to do something for his family that he never had. That was his reason, his Quan.
So you think, I always equate sales with dating. And I think coaching is like marriage. Think about who you ask the toughest questions to. If you don't ask your toughest questions to your spouse or lover, or what have you, question your relationship. If you're afraid, think of the question you're afraid of asking your spouse. That's the question to ask of a coaching client.
Mm-hmm.
That's how deep you can get. You have that permission. You might not have that with your spouse. You might be afraid. But you don't have to have that fear with a coachee. You don't. So go
I
for
wanted
it.
to add from my pastor the phrase, tears wash away the pain.
Love it.
Awesome.
Are we done here, Wendy?
Thank you very much, Alan. Any last questions for Alan?
Thanks, Alan.
Thanks,
Thank
Alan.
you.
We
You're
appreciate
welcome,
it.
Thank you,
everybody.
Alan.
Thank you, buddy.
That was
Great seeing you. I
fantastic.
want to see you all in October. I hope I do.
You got it, buddy. I'll hug you too.
Right.
We'll see you.
Thanks, guys.